right, we left off dealing with the shopping cart scenario. So we created a cart model and a line item model. And with that, we've referenced our instruments as well as the line items from the cart. So it's kind of confusing, but more or less we're able to compare each of those models and then know which instruments have been added to the cart when the time comes during the creation action. So to make more sense of this, let's fix up the views to actually propagate this stuff in real time. So in the carts folder, you're going to see a ton of actions that we really don't need. The main one we're going to focus on is the show. I'm going to start here just by adding some HTML. That's kind of like a typical shopping cart. All right, so on our show view, we've got some cool Rails stuff going on. Here is a partial rendering that knows by default, based on the relationships involved, to render a partial in the line items directory that will be called line item. It's kind of confusing, but it's just kind of a smart way to render and loop through an iteration of things in this fashion, as opposed to doing a typical, like carts or what, line items. If I can type that each do kind of thing. This is automatically doing that, so it's pretty neat. On top of that, we've added a button to empty the cart, and this is just calling the method of delete on the cart itself, similar to what we would do on any other type of record. And then below the actual rendering of the line items, we have a total price, which is what we added in the last video at the very end. It was the helper we added to the cart, and it defines the line items and goes through each and adds them up concurrently. So all that's happening in this little bitty view, so it's pretty neat. The next thing it's going to error out because we don't have that line items partial. We need to add that to our line items folder, so we can just put line item.html.erb and go into that partial and figure up the rest of the markup here. So I'll just type this out and probably speed it up and explain it later. Okay, so from our show view, we're rendering this partial. And the way it works is you're rendering the cart's line items. And this is plural here, but that's basically if you were to do a typical line items.each, something like this, like line items.each do line item. This is how that would work in the same way. Rails just automatically assumes this naming convention when you render a partial this way. So it's kind of a neat, concise way to save some code, but more or less do a lot under the hood. So you're rendering this, and that's how we get access to this name line item. So it's the singular version of this, which to me makes sense, hopefully for you too. So what we're doing is just rendering the quantity, the image of the instrument. So here through line item, we're grabbing the instrument, and in this case it's a thumbnail. We're also getting the title and the description, and then of course the price, and we're using the total price that we define on the line item model instead of the actual cart model. So this one's a little different. We're just getting the price times the quantity, which is a pretty simple calculation. And then finally, we have a way to remove the actual item from your cart instead of just deleting the entire cart every time. So hopefully, when we add things to the cart, we should see it, unless I typed wrong, which it looks like I did. Truncate description. Oh, I closed the bracket too early there. There we go. So there's 2 in the cart already because I added it once before, because that's based on the session, if you recall. So that's pretty cool. So I didn't even really have to like recall that stuff. One thing I noticed though that I might change is a small style thing. I forgot one quick little horizontal rule here. Just wanted to get a line below the keep shopping thing. There we go. Cool. So if we do a remove item, at this point we can just remove the whole thing. Looks like something's up here though. So let's check out our line items controller and verify that's working. Yep, typo guys. So I don't know why I thought card was the name of the model, but it's actually cart. So let's see if I refresh this. It's going to resubmit the form, but it did work. So cool. So at that point we can continue to add stuff to the cart. It should show up. You see our totals are updating too. So if I add that again, yeah, so that's pretty cool. So the functionality is there. If we empty the cart, let's see if that works. Cool, did that. I don't really want it to go to this route though. Instead, I want it to redirect to the root path, I guess. So let's see if that happens. On the cart controller, when we go to delete, yeah, it's going to the cart to. I always want the root path instead. So I'll go to here, I'll add something to the cart, and I'll empty the cart. Are you sure? And back to home. Awesome. Cool. So let's next update our account to show the cart in our application view. So right now I have the sell button, which works, but I want to show the cart too. And you don't have to be logged in to see it, but you do need to be logged in to see how many items are in your cart. Because I don't want users, I guess it shouldn't matter really if you're logged in now that I think about it, but let's see how I've coded it before. This is what I commented out in the beginning. It's this block here, and it's actually some helpers I've added later to make sure this was just more concise in the view. So let me go back here and comment that. So what we can do is go to our helpers. I'm just going to put these in the application helper. So the basically overlying application helper. So we can do def cart count page over 1. So we're just checking if there is more than one thing in the cart. We should display a counter in the nav bar. So I'm going to look for the cart items count. It's greater than or equal to 0. And then if it is, we'll return some HTML. You want to use single quotes within the double quotes here, so otherwise it won't render right. But we can do, since it's double quotes on the outside, we can do interpolation here of the cart line items count. Span, close that, and then this will render plain, so we actually want it to be HTML safe. So we're just telling Rails it's cool to render. And then we need another end, and then we need one more. This cart has items, so we'll return cart.line items count greater than 0. Cool. So in our view, we're checking first to see if the cart has items, and then if it does, we want to display this link to the actual cart. and it's going to have an icon of the shopping cart. And then if the cart count is over 1, we'll actually display a counter. So if all goes right, that should work. But we need things in our cart. And it looks like I did something wrong here. Cart count over 1. Why did I type page? There we go. Cool, so there it is. I think that's where I had it before. Yeah, there's probably a better home for it, but at any point you can go and find your cart at this stage of the game, so you don't even really need to be logged out, I don't think. It looks like I coded it that way, but that's just kind of a, I guess, preference, up to you. So it's based off your user session. So in this case, if I added something to the cart, if I add one more thing to the cart, should go and do 2. It looks like it's not though. All right, so at this point we have everything pretty much functioning. There's a few quirks I've just noticed that when I add multiples, like more than one of a single item, the count in the top nav does not update. That's something you could maybe look into. I know there's a quantity field for the actual line items, which is what I'm after, but I can't quite access it, and I'm not quite sure how I'm supposed to, and I'm trying to do this on the fly, but I'm gonna just let it go for now. It's maybe an enhancement I might add later, but I do know if you add multiple products that are different, it shows you how many are up there. So it's kind of a false advertisement going on there, but it still kind of works. If you feel like it, go ahead and extend that a little further. The final thing I want to talk about is seeding a database, and to do this, it's more or less an approach that just saves you a bunch of time from having to create new records by hand every time. So it's a new thing that I've just kind of learned to do. Instead of actually inputting all this data and having to do that, you can do it manually, or automatically I should say, with a seed file, and that's located in your database folder called seeds. And in here I'm actually just going to copy and paste what I have from my other file because it's pretty wordy, but it's essentially just a text file based on something you might write if you're in the Rails console environment, but you can just create records automatically in this case and go ahead and append it to your database. So each time you install your app, you don't have to actually create data from the start. So in this case, hooking into a device and doing the new method and adding an ID, a new user, a password, an email, all these things. And then from there, I'm creating instruments, and you can use these variables as parameters around other records. So what I'm doing here is setting a variable user, creating that user, and then using it in the user ID column of the instrument here. So as you can see, that's where that's coming in. And then it's going to be the same user throughout, so you have to kind of factor that in. If you want more than one user, you can create multiple, but you'd have to use their own parameters for each thing. It's kind of endless what you can do here. So one thing that I had no idea how to do is to input an image into a field. So this is pretty much the way to do it. And Rails root join here basically looks through your entire Rails directory for said file. So in this case, that's why I've added these images in our assets folder. In our images folder, all 6 of these are here. So you can see each one has their own 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then of course the data to go along with each. I'm sure there's tests you can run around this so that everything's working and all of that, but this is kind of just a way to get you off the ground running when a new app. So what I'm going to do is try to run this at this point. I'm going to get out of console here. So we can do Rails DB seed. That's pretty much it right there. So let's see if it works. If no errors come back, it should have worked. So what you can do is visit your app again, and you should see some data there. And I'm still logged in as my current user, which is the webcrunch user, but the one that actually created these files is the one that I showed you in the seed setup. So that's something to take into account right here. So I have to log in with that credentials at this point. So email would be Andy@example, and then password is the password. log in. So that account's created. You see my name here. I can edit and delete these, which is great. And you see all this stuff configured. Sadly, I didn't enhance this to show the image when you do go to edit view. It's kind of something you could do if you wanted to on your own. Essentially, that's it. So if you were to download this demo project on your own, you notice I didn't create this one, so those controls aren't there. So that's pretty handy. That verifies that that's working. Also notice that the CSS grid is magical in making this auto responsive. That's one line of code doing that. It's fantastic. Just to verify what line of code that is, I'll show you here. Grid typic, you display. Okay, you need 2 lines. It's display grid and then grid typic columns, and then you'll do a repeat and then an autofill and min max. And I just set a basic minimum width and then a maximum of 1 fraction. So it's kind of confusing, but it ends up looking like that, and that's pretty cool. So that's kind of what I was going for. But in the end, that's more or less the functionality in place. So we've got the add to cart functionality. We can add multiple things here, and you'll see that counter go up now. I should have figured in adding multiple things of 1 into the cart, but to make that counter really represent the actual quantity. But anyway, it is working. We're creating our total here. We've got our totals for each item. We've got our description, the quantity of each, so forth. We can remove one. It should redirect back here. You can empty the cart. Should redirect back to the root path, giving you a cart was successfully destroyed. One thing I forgot to add that I should is a quick little JavaScript addition that I wanted to do if you ever need to. Those notifications are nice, but they don't go away by default. So instead, and I'll probably just create a file here. Let me just global. This is document.add event listener. We do the turbolinks load thing again. If I could type. So I want the notification to hide after a set period of time. So I'm just going to call it notification equals document query selector. And I'm referencing a file. I'm not just typing this fast. Global notification. So if notification window dot set timeout function. So do this on this timeout function. Notification dot style dot display, simple as none, and then you can set how long until that happens. So 4,000 equals 4 seconds. And that's it. So each time I do something now, that will actually fade out after 4 seconds, assuming that works. Oh, what's up? Can't spell, right? Yep, that's the problem. Listen, let's try it now. Should say that, and then nothing. Awesome. There it is. Okay, cool. I got it. All right, so that's pretty much it. If you download this source code, I'd recommend going and just cloning it. So if I go out, maybe I'll do it real quick in my webcrunch directory. I'll go to my GitHub repo, Flanger demo, and clone this one. This isn't the one you should clone, but this is the one I did before just to verify that all this is working. I'll do a git clone into this directory. And then I'll cd into that. So let's say Flanger demo. And the first order of business is to do a bundle install. Okay. And then break DB migrate or Rails DB migrate. Basically creates all our records, which is everything we've done so far. Awesome. And then you can run Rails DB seed, and that's done. So then we could just run server, and this will be the Flanger demo app. As you can see, seeded. So same stuff, but it's just my other account instead of both accounts. So that's kind of cool. So that quick, you can get an app up and running. It's pretty neat. I hope you enjoyed this quick little series. Obviously, the next portion of this app would be to add the payment type of integration, which is a whole nother barrel, as I said before. So maybe future videos, I'll just kind of get in the mindset of that smaller task as opposed to building a full app, because it's kind of a comprehensive thing. You have to work with integrations, typically like Stripe or PayPal. Depending on what merchant you want to use. Stripe seems to be the easiest to use from what I hear. I'm working with it on one of my soon to be released apps soon, and it's kind of hard to configure, but it does work, and it's kind of neat to hook into some of the webhooks and events that happen. So you can send emails when a new account or payment has been received, stuff like that. It gets intense, but anyways, I hope this was helpful. If you see any errors, spot anything that should be fixed or should be fixed, please let me know. I'm always interested in hearing feedback as well as helping out. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the next Let's Build.